The other myth that I hear a lot, and it's interesting, I worked with a digital media company last year that specializes in online video. And the myth that they were perpetuating from the inside was this idea that they were ahead of the curve on understanding what's going on with consumer behavior in the online video space. And I found that fascinating because I did all the stuff that they were looking at around how people consume content, short form versus long form content, what works online, what works on air. I did that work for NBC Olympics in 2004 for the Athens Olympics. I did that work for Warner Brothers in 2006. And I was like, you're not ahead of the curve. This was being, the studios were looking at these questions in the early to mid 2000s and chose not to make an investment in it. And that, actually with NBC Olympics, they chose to make a massive investment in it, and it really worked in 2006 and 2008. Online video was extremely successful for them. The questions they were asking, though, were predating all of that, and we're really on the very early end when people were still on dial-up for the most part, outside the coasts. We weren't on dial-up, but we're not the norm. But it was fascinating to me that there was this false understanding inside the digital and technology space that the studio world didn't get it. That was definitely the prevailing sentiment. And I remember going in there and saying, it's exactly the opposite. The studio world gets it and chose not to invest in it. So what you need to understand is why they chose not to invest in it. There are many studios that thought, we have this library of content. We can put it up on a website pretty easily, with an infrastructure that probably we can even buy off the shelf, but we could certainly have the bandwidth to develop it in-house. And we can create basically a syndication platform through the internet without going through a Hulu or a YouTube or any other aggregator. And they consciously chose not to. And one of the reasons they chose not to is research that showed that was actually a really hard sell, both to advertisers and to consumers, because you had to have 100% of your library up there if you were going to do that, to have enough to bother. And it wasn't the way people thought of it. When they were in the mood for a long-form thing, generally speaking, people just went to TV, turned on the TV, kind of sat down and chilled out with it. It was first-run stuff that tended to be more powerful, and short-form that tended to be more powerful online. And that was their specialty. They had a lot of long-form library, not a lot of short-form library. So it was a sort of interesting thing as we worked with different online video aggregators to really help them understand, when you get people to come to your site, it's about having such a breadth of content that people want to come back, even if they don't know it's there, because they know there will be something they can find. So you start to see what has taken off. Hulu and Netflix, Break.com, Cracked, sites like that have so much on them and appeal to so many different sensibilities that you can always find something there. There's this broader brand around it, but the brand is really relying on breadth of content. And a lot of these digital companies were thinking, well, we can build this niche site, and niche sites are really tough because you go once, it's cool, then you forget about it for a month or two. It doesn't build that regular daily behavior that they're really looking for. And then advertisers don't want to be part of it because they don't know if they're going to get you or not. So I always think that that's one of the fascinating things to me in the digital space, is that there's a little bit of a sense, and actually what I tell people, and I had this exact conversation with a friend of mine who runs research for a digital video company, there's a lot of that sensibility, and that kind of speaks to the digital dying side of it. In my experience, the innovation is run by engineers. So I don't know if who here has worked at a digital media company, like that specializes in digital? Is there anybody that comes from that space? So not too many. Most of you are traditional media. What's interesting about that is the corporate culture in a lot of these places is really driven by engineering and innovation. And I found that fascinating. I actually went in-house and worked with a company to help them start up a research division last year, and found that really fascinating. It was not specific to this company. As we were looking at our competitors, they were doing the same thing. Most of their platforms were built by engineers, imagined by engineers, and entrepreneurial engineers. That's sort of the Silicon Valley mentality. And we would go in and say, I remember myself saying to them, and I was looking across the industry seeing it as well, you're selling people based on what's called brand advertising. And basically the idea of online is there's two, I'm way oversimplifying, but there's basically two types of advertising that are sold online, right? There's performance advertising, which is acquisitions, it's emails, it's in the moment, I want to get a hit to my website, I want to acquire a new customer, it's literally almost real time, transactional in a sense. And then there's brand advertising, which is building a brand over time. I want to make people aware of something, I want to build loyalty to my brand, I want to build trust, I want to move the needle on certain parameters like we're cool, we're hip, whatever the case may be. That's brand advertising. And traditionally speaking, video is better at brand advertising, and display ads and email are better at performance advertising. And what was interesting to me is that the digital industry grew up in performance advertising. It was all about display ads and email. And now that bandwidth is fast enough, it's gotten into video, which is the brand advertising and the head-to-head with television. And what's fascinating to me is that you see all these engineering developments that do really cool tricks and tools, but they're completely misaligned with what advertisers want in terms of metrics that show moving the needle on brand. So, and it was a conversation I had where every single company in this space was reporting something called click-through rate, which was, did you click on the ad to watch it? And I remember saying, like, as a content provider in the video space, the last thing I want somebody doing is clicking on the pre-roll and leaving my video and not coming back. That's not a sustainable business model from a content producer standpoint. And even if the website goes along with that in the short run to get the pre-roll video dollars, they're not going to go along with it in the long run because they're going to lose content creators. Because no content creator wants to partner with a site where nobody gets to their video, nobody watches their video, because they're leaving and going away to something else before they get there. So fundamentally speaking, there were all these cool things they were doing with, there's a company now, and I'm blanking on the name, but they do what's called interactive pre-roll. And they can pop up things and games and things like that before you even get to the video. And I'm thinking to myself, if I'm a content creator, like, I hate this, because it's keeping people away from my content. It's actually not, unlike advertising on TV, where you can't stop it, you can't, click on it to do something else, although we were probably going down that path. This was something that, if it works, if it makes money, takes people away from content, fundamentally in the way it's designed. And I always thought that was really interesting, that it kind of comes from a place of all this was developed by engineering to solve this advertising problem, and not coming from the perspective which traditional media has, where content creators are oftentimes very much weighing in on those business decisions, and rightfully so. Because ultimately people are coming there for the advertising, they're coming there for the content, and it's only going to be as good as the content they're able to get. So I think that's probably the number one challenge when you think about this idea of digital dimes. I think the number one challenge for the digital industry is learning content and learning that intersection of creativity and business and technology, because right now it's very much driven by technology. They're starting to adopt business and understand the brand marketing side of it. The ones that are succeeding, I think, best understand creativity. And it may not seem obvious that a Hulu recognizes creativity, but Hulu was funded by studios. That's fundamentally creative. Their entire business model is rooted in that. I think it's fascinating that Netflix's big swing for the fences is original programming. And a lot of people are kind of naysaying that, like, what do they know about that? I actually listened to the COO give a presentation a couple weeks ago over at the Anderson School, where I went to grad school at UCLA. And his thing was, look, we kind of have to do that because we know that, over time, there are going to be a lot of ways that studios can distribute their content, whether it's movie content or TV content. And we're just one of the mix. And they may not always want to go with us. So we have to do something to keep our brand, ahead of the curve, and to make people want to come to Netflix. And I'm sitting there laughing because I'm like, it's the HBO Showtime model. I'm like, this has been done before. It's premium cable, right? It's not that different. And it's funny to me to listen to a lot of people say, well, they don't know what they're talking about, because you could have said the same thing about HBO 25 years ago, or Showtime 10 years ago. Same thing, and yet they both succeeded on that front, doing really great original programming. So I don't particularly believe that it's true that Netflix can't pull it off. I think that they understand exactly that people come for content, and they better be known for content, or they're going to lose their brand strength in that world where they go from DVD to streaming. So to me, I look at the winners and who's really working in this space, and the winners get that it's not just about the technology. Netflix has amazing technology. I mean, they built their brand on that ability to do references and search and anticipate what you like, and that is, that technology is their sweet spot and their competitive advantage. They also moved with the curve. They went from DVD to streaming as the industry changed, smart business move. But at the same time, now they're having to understand content and get in the content space. And so you look at companies that are doing all three things, and those are the ones that are really percolating to the top over time. And that's the one trend that I tend to see.